Vážení přátelé, dámy a pánové, je mi velkou ctí přivítat vás na dnešní úplně první tiskové konferenci letošního 47. ročníku Mezinárodního filmového festivalu Karlovy Vary. Je mi to ctí o to větší, že naší hlavní hvězdou letošního festivalu je čerstvá nositelka Křišťálového glóbu za mimořádný umělecký přínos světové kinematografie. Oscarová herečka a žena s titulem dáma Helen Mirren. Je, myslím, důležité připomenout, že paní Helen Mirren zítra ve 14 hodin uvede ve velkém sále svůj nový film Za zavřenými dveřmi, The Door v angličtině, ve kterém jí vám dobře známý světově proslulý režisér István Szabó dal příležitost k mimořádnému hereckému výkonu. Pan režisér tady bude taky zítra uvádět film s paní Mirren. Nemenší ctí mi přivítat vzácného hosta nalevo, amerického filmového režiséra a producenta Taylora Hackforda. V současné době také prezidenta Sdružení amerických režisérů, který je manželem paní Mirren.
And he is also an Oscar winner. He is.
He
won an Oscar.
He won an Oscar for Teenage Father.
So you have two Oscar winners here.
And there was a nomination for the movie Ray. Byl nominovaný za režii za film Ray, kdy představitel hlavní role tuto nominaci převrátil ve zlatou sošku. Samozřejmě víme, že biografie obou našich hostů by byly velmi dlouhé, ale já předpokládám, že musíme dát přednost především vašim otázkám. Tisková konference bude trvat 30 minut a já vás tedy poprosím o vaše první otázky. Ještě než vás vyvolám, máme tady mnoho televizních štábů, je opravdu důležité, abychom všichni mluvili do mikrofonu, aby se to dobře nahrálo. Děkuji. Tamhle slečna úplně vzadu a pak paní Spáčilová, Mladá fronta.
Hello, Eva Přivřá from Festival Daily. You talked yesterday about that there's not enough women in film industry. And I know that the actresses also complain that there are not enough good roles for women. And do you think that the way how to deal with it is to play roles usually played by men or previously played by men, like you did, for example, in The Tempest on State of Play? And how was your approach to this role? Because it was like men roles and not for women, not originally written for women. Thank you.
Well, I wasn't particularly talking about actresses last night. I was talking about people behind the camera, specifically directors. There are, in fact, a lot of women in the film industry, but not so many on film crews, and certainly not nearly as many film directors as I would like to see, or indeed writers. I think yes, I think in a way, you know, I've always said to writers, you know, you don't have to worry about writing roles for women. Just write it for a man and give it a woman's name. You know, it works just as well. So, and I think in my case of playing a role that was originally played by a man in State of Play, and then obviously in The Tempest, the translation worked very well. But I have always said that, you know, I've never complained about the roles for women in drama. I complain about the roles for women in life. And I think that as the roles for women in life get more present, more powerful, more productive, you then see the roles for women in drama follow on. And indeed, I think that has been the case. Today, in 2012, is a very different picture from how it was even 10 years ago, and I suspect in another 10, 15, 20 years, the picture will change again. Women are becoming more and more prevalent in life. We see them more on television, in politics, and that really is where I would like to, put my attention, is bringing women into the public eye in that way.
Takže prosím mikrofon doprostřed.
Den, Spáčilová dnes. Já bych se také ráda vrátila ke včerejšímu velmi dojemnému večeru a k projevu. Vy jste tam říkala, vzpomínala jste na velkou osobnost Nori Ephron a mě by zajímalo, když je podle vás málo režisérek nebo málo žen za kamerou, jestli byste zkusila ještě jednou přestoupit tu hranici a postavit se za kameru sama, případně úplně radikálně změnit profesi a rozhodnout se, že tedy teď budete vypsát a režírovat. Děkuji.
No, I did actually direct a short film for television in America, a half-hour film, and I loved the process. I had a wonderful time. I'm very lucky. I'm married to a director, so I had advice, you know, in my bedroom. But I came to the end of that experience absolutely having loved it, thinking this, my God, what a wonderful job this is, what fun it had been, and I'm not going to do this again because I'm an actress. That's what I am. I'm not a director. If I had wanted to be a director, I would have become a director early on in my life. I didn't. I chose to be an actress. I was asked after finishing that film if I would like to do a long form, you know, a 2-hour film again for television, and I said no because I love being an actress. I think it's my chosen destiny. And no, I don't particularly want to change paths. But I do want to encourage and hopefully work with many female directors in the future.
Potřebujeme mikrofon tady vepředu, Lenko. There's a colleague from Portugal.
Hi, Helen. Good to see you here, and congratulations for the award. You spoke yesterday about the power of women that you would like to see more in films, but you in a way set the rules in the 60s with your femininity, and you didn't even had the problem to expose yourself in films. Do you think that is some kind of empowerment that you have?
Nudity is empowerment, is that what you're saying?
In contrast to exploitation. How do you say it?
I don't know, really. I mean, you can look at it either way. I never felt particularly empowered by that experience. It was something I kind of gritted my teeth and got on with. I do believe in a certain amount of liberation, certainly, and it was a part of my personal journey towards a kind of a liberation. But, where it crosses the line into exploitation is a very blurry line, and I don't think anyone's ever really quite defined that. I certainly think that it's kind of appalling in the film industry at large that violence and torture is more acceptable than nakedness and sexuality. I find that absolutely appalling revelation of something unpleasant in the human nature. You can't lay all the blame of that at the feet of the filmmakers because after all they know what the public want, and they are pandering to the public. So I think it's something in all of us that we have to sort of look at ourselves, really. So, anyway.
Hi, Ellen. Hi.
Yes.
I'm from Israel. It's always great and honor to meet you. I was the experience of the door. And what happened to the project about Gaza, and did you change your attitude to the situation in the Middle East after you play a Mossad agent?
The door was, honestly, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It doesn't look like that to the eye, but I think I felt the responsibility of the fact that it was a Hungarian story, a Central European story, to do with the whole history of Central Europe, the Second World War, the experience under the communism. So I felt an incredible weight of responsibility playing that role. And I felt all the time that I was falling very short, you know. I had to put myself in Istvan's hands, and
You're talking about the Israeli film.
yes, the debt. You wanted to talk about the door first, yes,
Oh.
yes. Sorry, yes. So it was really, really difficult, and I would say, honestly, one of the hardest, maybe the hardest role I've ever played. The only great advantage was that I wore absolutely no makeup at all, which meant that I didn't have an hour's preparation. It just took me 5 minutes to get ready in the morning, which was fantastic. As far as the debt is concerned, yes, the Gaza. I don't know that that's going to be made. I'm still hoping that it will, but it's one of those wonderful scripts that are, you know, trying to find financing and don't necessarily find it. In terms of my experience in Israel, because we shot some of the debt in Israel, you know, it's an extraordinary country, and Tel Aviv is an extraordinary town. And yes, of course, when you're in the country, you learn so much more about the people and the problems, and where people are extraordinary and very brave and very proactive. So I met some extraordinary people in Israel who I was very impressed by.
Poprosím.
I hope you've got some questions for my husband. Otherwise.
Uprostřed, paní Podskalská, uprostřed.
Podskalská, deník, dobrý den. Já bych se s dovolením zastavila u jednoho vašeho staršího filmu, který je v podstatě také na ženské téma, a to jsou Holky z kalendáře, který jsme mohli vidět, kde vlastně se britské ženy z jednoho malého městečka spojí u odvážného projektu a nafotí své akty pro kalendář. Tak by mě zajímalo, jestli vám se poštěstilo se někdy účastnit podobného projektu, kde se sešlo víc žen, a co si myslíte vůbec o ženském přátelství a o tom, že když je to potřeba, že dokáží táhnout za jeden provaz a to všechno ještě navíc dělají s nadhledem. Děkuju.
I haven't had a project similar to that, and you know, one of my reasons for doing it was, as I said last night, you know, a film set is a very, very masculine place, and for all of certainly my young filmmaking days, you know, you're surrounded by men. There's very few other women in the cast. If you're lucky, and that was the great thing about The Door, incidentally, rarely it was a film about two women, and that's, you know, fairly rare, becoming more common now, but, you know, when I started in film, up to, God, even 10 years ago, that was sort of almost unheard of. A few notable exceptions. Diabolik, that's about two women, isn't it? Yes. But anyway, so, you know, the idea of doing a film with 6 or 8 who are all friends of mine, because, you know, when you live in my profession, you manage to hold on for that long. You begin to all know each other. So I'd worked with a lot of the women I was working with before. They were all, you know, they were friends and colleagues. So we had such an incredibly good time making that film. You know, we laughed all the time. It was incredible fun, and we all recognised, you know, what a rare experience it was. You know, men get that experience far more often in film because, as I say, there's usually 5 or 10 male characters to every one female character.
Tam měl by zůstat mikrofon tamhle uprostřed, abychom nechodili daleko.
Thank you. I'm from the Finnish news agency, so a question for both of you about White Nights. The importance of that film for you, and what was it like to shoot film in Helsinki?
you want to start there, Kay?
Well, we actually, in White Nights, we shot in many countries. We shot Scotland for Siberia. We shot Lisbon, Portugal for the KVIFF, because the Opera House in Lisbon is very similar to the KVIFF. We shot in Helsinki for some of the exteriors. I think the most interesting thing about those locations is that I went into Russia. At that time, you couldn't go make a film about Russia. I went myself alone into Leningrad with my camera, and I photographed everything I wanted to photograph. But then I have to say what really happened. I can say it now. I got a Finnish film crew. I had all my stills, and I showed them all the places I wanted to do. And then I did not want just Helsinki. You know, Helsinki is a fabulous city, but in relation, there's one old section of town that has some relation to Russian architecture. But Leningrad is vast. St. Petersburg was vast. And for everyone that has been there, you realize what a big city it is. So I went in and I photographed the things I wanted, and I got a Finnish film crew to go in, saying they were making a film about tourism, and got the cooperation of the Russian government, and they brought all the footage out. Mikhail Brishnikov, who was the star of the film, said that that'll never happen, and he was at the time the head of the American Ballet Theater. And I will always remember him sitting down. We had a bet. He said they'll never be able to get back with the footage. And then I had it. I walked in. He was in the middle of a rehearsal. And I said, come here. And I had a monitor set up with a videotape. And he sat down for 2.5 hours, completely stopped everything he was doing, and just looked at the city that was his city, that he hadn't seen in many, many years. But anyway, after all of that, and getting it always in the film, and clearly there are many things that aren't Helsinki. Many. All the critics said, yet again, Helsinki is used as Leningrad. It's like, you know, but to Russians or people who knew Russia, it was very good because they were able to actually see things. And people kept saying to me, all the people from Eastern Europe, Milos Forman, who's a friend, many other people said, how did you get that footage? Because they knew we couldn't go there. So those were some of the problems. It was obviously important to me because I met my wife on that film, and that was the beginning of our relationship.
Likewise, important for me. Well, it was also important for me because I hadn't done a lot of American films at that point. I'd done a film called 2010. For a sort of brief moment in time, I was sort of Hollywood's go-to Russian actress for some reason, because I could do a halfway decent Russian accent. But it was only my second sort of big Hollywood film. So it was important for me like that to experience that. I'd only before that done, you know, low-budget British movies.
Well, I know you have been planning to work together, hoping to make another project, but actually did happen a couple of years ago. I wanted to ask you about the collaboration with your wife on Love Range, and also if you still plan to go for another one, because I suppose it's not really easy to find a project that would fit both of you, really.
It's true. I mean, we often tried to work together before, but unless, as you say, something was tailor-made for us both, tailor-made. But, you know, often I'd be in a project, I'd think, I wonder if Taylor would like to do this, but he wouldn't respond to it. Likewise, he had asked me to play various roles in films that he'd done, but I didn't really sort of think the roles were good enough, actually. So Taylor had always been looking for a project that we could do together. And he'd come up with one, and we couldn't finance it, or for whatever reason. And then he came up with Love Ranch, and I thought it was such an amazing story. I loved the story. I loved the milieu that it takes place in. I loved the fact that we could work together for the first time for so many years. So, you know, Taylor did everything. He found the financing. He really kind of made it happen, which was amazing for me.
And of course, it was a great experience to work. You know, you see the result of Helen's work on the screen, but the other experience that you can't ever understand is the joy of working with her on the set. There are a few actors in the world that I've worked with, very few, that you can ask almost anything of, and they will be able to do it. They'll be able to translate it into something that makes you look better. But, you know, some actors you get to there's a limit. You say, I want you to go for this emotionally, or I want you to do this situation physically. And they come up against a stone wall. There are certain actors, and Helen is one, where you really literally get everything you ask for. And that's such a pleasure from a director's point of view, and from the actors who are working with her. Because leadership on a set comes from the director, but when you have the star who is literally being there, not going back to their trailer, doing whatever they're asked to do, it has a very, what should I say, salutary effect on the other actors, saying, I better do the same, and it makes for a much better film. So it was a joy.
Tak prosím pana Železného a potom tady slečna v první řadě.
Jakub Železný, Czech TV. Let me mention that we will broadcast tonight your film The Queen at 9:35 on
great.
Channel 1. And let me ask you how difficult it was to play a role of really contemporary existing person, even if the person is the queen of your country. Thank you very much.
It was a major challenge. I knew that I had, you know, everybody in England and maybe many people around the world know what the Queen looks like, what the Queen sounds like, how the Queen walks, you know, the sound of her voice. So I knew I had to pay attention to all of those elements. And then on top of that, especially in my country, anything to do with the royal family you know that you're going to have so much attention on you. So, and there's going to be a huge amount of criticism, there's going to be a huge amount of discussion about it. Now, since the Queen, I think that kind of released something, and now I think it's become sort of easier in general. And people have realized, oh, you can do this, and you know, many different projects now are appearing with a similar kind of situation. But then it really hadn't particularly been done before, and so I was very conscious of the fact that I'd have to really work at it. But then the thing that relieved me in many ways was I looked at a lot of film of the Queen, but I also looked at a lot of painted portraits of the Queen, and she's been very liberal, unlike Elizabeth I, who really controlled her image like a brand. Elizabeth II has been extremely liberal. She's had many portraits painted. She allows the portraitists to do anything they want. She doesn't control them at all. She just gives them a free rein. I think there was recently a portrait of her with her eyes closed, for example. She had Annie Leibovitz come in and do photographs. So there are all these portraits, and I suddenly thought, that's what it is. You're an artist, this is your portrait of the Queen. It isn't, you know, it's not a perfect replica of the Queen. It's your impression as an artist, as an actress, of who you think the Queen is. And the minute I thought of my work as simply as a portrait, my personal portrait, so there's as much of me in it in a way, the way there is with a painter painting a picture. There's as much of the painter in there as there is of the person sitting for the painting. I thought about it in the same way. And that kind of freed me somehow, freed me from the terror of it anyway.
I think one thing I can add, which is very interesting, not from a filmmaker's point of view, but from a husband's point of view. I was with my wife when she was preparing. We went away for 2 weeks, and she was going to be doing this film afterwards. And she was doing her research, and she had a lot of videotapes of the Queen. And over the course of time, I noticed, because I was writing and doing things, but I noticed that the only films that she was looking at were the Queen before she became the Queen. In other words, as a little girl. And I kept waiting for, because she's playing the Queen as a sitting Queen, as an older woman, I kept waiting for those videotapes to come out, and they never did. And I said, baby, I don't understand. Why are you looking at just her as a little girl? Aren't you? We're running out of time, and you're not going to have a chance to look at the meat of this character. And she said, I'm never going to look at her after she became Queen, because once she put the crown on her head, she became the Queen. If I want to know who she was, I'm looking at her as a little girl. And I thought that was really fascinating. And not that Helen was embodying that the reality of her as a little girl at all, but I think the spirit of, because remember, this Elizabeth was not going to be Queen. Her father was not, all of that process, or at least, pardon me, her father didn't think he was going to be king. In the process of creating the role, what she was doing was capturing that little girl, and then, as the Queen did, put this down, but you saw that character come out through the eyes, which I found to be fascinating.
Ruská redakce Českého rozhlasu Prokofjeva. Když už jsme u toho Ruska, paní Mirren někdy říkala, že její dolní půlka je ruská a horní je britská. Také znám, že vy jste zahrála ve filmu Poslední neděle německého režiséra, kde jste zahrála manželku ruského spisovatele Lva Tolstova, Sofiu. A já bych chtěla, abyste nám pověděla o té zkušenosti v tom snímku, o té postavě, a také pokud možné porovnala byste tu postavu Sofii Andrejevny s postavou Emerence v posledním snímku The Door, která byla pro vás těžší, taková vyčerpávající. Děkuju.
Well, it was a wonderful script. The Last Station, written by an American writer, but a really wonderful script, and what a great role, as my husband knows, I can't resist a great role, and this was really a fantastic role. Again, I think because of the repression and the self-control of the character of the Queen, it was great to be offered something that was the exact opposite, someone whose emotions are just out and on the table constantly. She was an incredibly emotional, outward character. So, an absolute pleasure to play her. Sorry, what was it? The other part of your question was...
Comparing that with The Door.
Oh, compare it with The Door, exactly. Very interesting comparison, because again, very, very different from Emerence in The Door. Emerence in The Door is more like the Queen in a funny way. And when Istvan offered it to me, he said, she is a queen, Emerence is another kind of a queen. And I know what he meant. Sophia was more exhausting, but Emerence was more difficult, because you never quite know, and this is the case in the book, the way the book is written. You never quite know if this woman was a Nazi collaborator, or if she was a kind of a heroine. There's an incredible mystery there. Is she actually a really evil sort of character, or is she a very noble character? And you just don't know, because she's so uncommitted. And that was hugely challenging to play, I found. In a way, although it's more exhausting to play someone like Sophia, in a weird way it's easier, because everything's out there. As long as you can do that, it's kind of easier. You just have to go for it. With Sophia, you have to be on the bridge and jump into the water, without thinking. Emerence is a very, very different, very different character, but interesting, both sort of Slavic ish, characters, Eastern European characters. And goodness me, there's this incredible difference between them. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a young colleague at the far behind. I hope she over there has a microphone. Okay. Lenko, tam úplně vzadu. There are actually two last questions.
Hello, Klára Kolářová, Festival Daily. I would like to ask you, what do you prefer? Do you prefer working for film or working for theater, or do you consider to be equal for you? Thank you.
Well, I always say I prefer the one that I'm not doing at the time, because when I'm working in film and I'm getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, I think, oh, I wish I was doing theatre and I didn't have to get up till 11 o'clock in the morning. And vice versa, when I'm doing theatre and I'm doing a Wednesday matinee, or I can't go anywhere because I've got 8 performances a week, I'm thinking, why aren't I doing a movie? I'd be in and out in a month and it would be over and done with, and I'd be free. So but I love both forms. The truth is, I love both forms. They're very, very different. The schedule is different. The people, the society is different. But but there is a constant, which is engaging in the world of the imagination, and that's sort of what I love to do. I would, if I had ultimately to choose between the two, I would probably go for film, because I've come to absolutely love the process of film making. But it would be a difficult choice, for sure.
Wendy Mitchell from Screen International. I'm very excited to see Hitchcock later this year. I was wondering if you could tell us why you came to that, if you're a big Hitchcock fan, and what it was like to play Alma.
Wonderful. Again, really a great script by Sasha Gervasi, who then directed it. 2 reasons. One was to have the opportunity to work with the great Sir Anthony Hopkins. We come from a very similar background in the sense of theatre, British theatre, then coming to America, doing film. But having followed such a similar trajectory, we've actually never worked together before. So it was a great opportunity to work with him. Where are you off to, darling?
John.
Oh, okay.
I was trying to be.
You were leaving.
John McLaughlin also wrote this.
And John McLaughlin, yes, no, absolutely, yes. The original writer was John McLaughlin. Sasha did a draft, but anyway, it was a fabulous script, and to work with Anthony Hopkins, to do a film in Los Angeles. It was shot in Los Angeles, which is very rare nowadays, believe it or not, that films are actually shot in LA. I could be at home with my husband. There were all kinds of great reasons to do it. Plus the fact, yet again, it was a really great role. Alma, one of the great unsung, speaking of women in film, one of the great unsung heroines of film. She was extremely proactive in the making of Hitchcock's masterworks. He himself gave her all the credit in the world for her contribution. So, it was great to bring Alma out of the shadows.
I have a question for both of you, actually, about the experience. I know everyone has had this, both actors and filmmakers. Sometimes you work on a project and it's a great experience making it, you're having a wonderful time, and the film doesn't quite turn out the way that you had envisioned that it would, and vice versa. Sometimes it's a very difficult shoot in many ways, and yet it turns out to be a film that everyone loves. Taylor, an example, Officer and a Gentleman, I know about because I interviewed Deborah Winger, who talked about the terrible experience she had making it, and she's glad that everybody enjoyed the movie, and it turned out so well, and she gave a great performance, but apparently it wasn't such a pleasant experience for her while making it. So I wonder, from both of your perspectives, if you've had that kind of experience, and if obviously you don't know while you're making it how it's going to turn out.
Well, you do have
films that are sometimes, all films are difficult, and when you're in the middle of the process, it is like a war. The people that work on a film, meaning sometimes the crew, sometimes the actors, it's difficult because their perception of the film. And I don't perceive a film ever is going to be a waltz on the dance floor or a walk in the park. It is going to be a war. And my perception is that will be difficult. So the people around, and I think it's become more and more this way in Hollywood. Everyone has a kind of touchy-feely feel, oh, it should be harmonious on the set, and everything should be lovely. Well, not to me. The process should be hopefully as collaborative as possible. Hopefully the people that are truly being challenged are enjoying that challenge. And in the process, we're all working very hard. And I can look back, and I think a lot of people look back on some of the most successful films, having a very difficult time shooting, but realizing that the joy is in the work. Other people may come to it looking for a waltz in the park, and if they didn't have that feeling, too bad. And I won't comment on what Deborah says because she's very vocal. I do believe it's her best work, and therefore something happened that was right. But when you go through some different actors especially approach their work in a different way, and sometimes it's painful for them, and I understand that if they've reached someplace. Kathy Bates, when I was doing Dolores Claiborne, I think if you asked her, did she have a good time? No. But she gave a great performance. And I think that that process is always in the eye of the beholder.
Yes, I mean, it is interesting. You hear stories of films that were a nightmare on the set, and you just don't see it on the screen. You hear stories of people who loathe each other, and on the screen there's unbelievable electricity. Then you hear stories of people who fall in love making the film, or are already in a deep love relationship, and there's absolutely no chemistry on the screen whatsoever. It's a very peculiar thing, film. So all I can say is there are no rules, and I've come to learn there are absolutely no rules. And whatever happened on that last film doesn't mean anything similar to that is going to happen on this next film. And that's what I love about filmmaking, is because each time you come to a film, it's a terrifying moment, but when you step onto that set and there is this whole group of completely disparate people you don't know, you've never met before, and you have to make this thing together. You have to come together and you have to make this thing together. I love film crews for this reason. And you're all going to work together in this incredibly intense way with incredible challenges, physical challenges of cold, of late nights, of all kinds of problems. People are going to be dealing with problems every day of their life. My God, if this happened in any other business, I think that people would just fall apart. And it's very interesting on a set. You have young runners who come in. They're the young, keen people. They're like interns. It's their first job on a set, and they're so excited, and they're the ones up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And you have 2 or 3 of them. They're being paid nothing. You can always tell the ones that are going to make it in the film industry because they're loving it. They can't wait to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, put their wet gear on and their sou'westers, and they never have enough clothes on, so they're freezing cold. But they're loving it, and they're the first people there in the morning, they're the last people there at night. And you go, you're the one, you're going to be a producer or a director or a cinematographer in 10 or 15 years' time. It's like a little world is created of human behavior on each movie, and I think that's why, in answer to the theatre versus film question, I said I think when it comes to it, I choose film, and it's for that very reason, that it's constantly different, and it is an amazing experience. I don't know how many of you here are filmmakers or have ever engaged in that process, but I know that you know what I'm talking about.
Já mám jednu dobrou, jednu špatnou zprávu. Ta špatná je, že bohužel tisková konference se blíží ke svému konci. Tohle byla poslední otázka. Ta dobrá zpráva ale je, že pokud tady zůstanete, tak od 11:30 tady začíná panel s názvem Proč se kradou filmy, kde pan Taylor Hackford bude hlavním panelistou spolu s ostatními českými producenty a filmovými odborníky, takže je to přímo tady a je to za chviličku, takže pokud byste se ještě chtěli něco připtat pana režiséra, budete mít na to vlastně další čas. Já se ale bohužel musím rozloučit s naší hlavní hvězdou, se kterou bychom si jistě mohli povídat několik dalších hodin a poděkovat jí, že tady s námi strávila čas dopoledne a říct jí, jak moc se těšíme, až nám uvede zítra svůj nový film a poděkovat, že přijela do Karlových Varů. Thank you very much for coming.